or Councilmember Lawson. Let me check with her real quick.
Good morning, Mr. Sundberg, Councilmember Sundberg, that is.
Well, good morning, Becky.
How are you?
I'm doing really well, thank you.
Good.
It's a beautiful day.
Yes.
In the neighborhood. Okay, we may need to send Councilmember Lawson another link.
I'm sending her one right now.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you, Crystal.
Thank you.
We'll give it one more minute. It's not any different than the other committee. She said that this is the only committee she has a hard time getting into. But it's the same WebEx links, right?
Yeah, it's the same link.
Yeah. Okay, and she should be in any second. And Crystal, you're sending it in the link in the email to her, right?
Yes, I did send it via email.
Okay. Okay, she says she's almost in. We can go ahead and start. So thanks, everyone. It's the Planning and Economic Development Committee for February 8th. And just happy day to all of you. We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. And next would be the approval of the minutes from January 11th. Councilmember Sundberg, did you have a chance to look at those?
Yes, no changes from my point of view.
Okay, and I was good with the minutes as well.
I'm good too, Councilmember Bergan.
Wonderful, thank you. Okay, the minutes are approved, and we'll go ahead and got kind of a short agenda today, but the first thing is the monument signs. And are we going to have Lamar present first and then staff?
Yes, Councilmember Bergan, Janine Rusted, Director of Planning and Development Services. And I was looking to see if Councilmember Jurinsky was here because she is the one that had brought this up as the previous chair. And I wanted to see if she wanted to say a few words before we hand it over.
Do not see her on here.
I haven't seen her either.
Maybe she'll join us. Why don't we go ahead and get started?
Perfect.
Councilmember Bergan, I'm also looking around to see if Steve Cecil's on, and it's looking like he's having some bit of technical difficulties. So I'm trying to help him get on and use the right link, but obviously want to be respectful of everyone's time. So I don't know if you want to move to the next item, and then hopefully, as you're talking about that, Steve can jump on.
I'm here now.
Oh, there he is. Sorry,
Okay.
Lots of folks on. I didn't see him.
Okay. Well, go ahead. We'll let Lamar go ahead and start, and then we'll have Janine present afterwards.
Sounds good. Thank you. I'm going to kick it off. I'm Peter Wall with Wall King Consulting, working with Lamar Advertising. Just a couple of quick introductions. Would like to introduce Steve Cecil, who's the real estate manager and market manager for Lamar here in Colorado, and Brent Window, who's the senior vice president and the territory manager, is also on today. Steve's going to go through just a quick presentation, and then would love to open it up for conversation and questions, and really appreciate everyone's time and consideration this morning.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank
Perfect.
you.
Yes, thank you. And thank you all for giving me the opportunity this morning to take up some of your time. Let me see if I can't share my screen. My share icon does not, there we go. There we go. Can everybody see that?
We can see it.
Okay. All right. So some of you have heard of our one of our newest partnership products is a parquee.
It's staying on the same slide though. I don't know.
It's not, it's frozen, like Peter was mentioning.
Hmm. Crystal, should we have Steve email it and then we would be able to share it, or?
Let me
I could share it on my end if you'd like, Steve.
Yeah, yes, please. Thank you. Sorry about this. It's my secondary screen is completely frozen. It's not even doing anything right now.
Okay, give me just a minute.
Hi, this is Rachel Allen from the City Attorney's Office. I noticed that your presentation was marked confidential, so I just wanted to make sure this is a public meeting, and so I just want to make sure you want to share that information in this public meeting.
Yes. Yep. No problem. Thank you for
Okay.
clarifying that. But yes, it is fine.
Thanks, Rachel.
Can we just start on the slide 3, if you would, please? Perfect. So Parkey, the partnership opportunity that we hope to have with the City of Aurora, it's a digital city communication device located on municipal properties. Each one is uniquely designed to promote and complement the surrounding areas, becoming a source of civic pride for the community. The Parkey provides an attractive medium to promote the vision of and provide passive income to the local governments. If you could go ahead and just click to the next one. I'll just go through these really quickly, and then we can have I think there'll be plenty of questions at the end. Many jurisdictions similar to Aurora in the country are searching for new and innovative ways to increase revenue without overburdening their constituents with additional taxes. The Parkey program is designed specifically with this purpose in mind. It provides much needed revenue to a city with zero taxpayers funding. And zero taxpayers is zero, not creating artwork, not building it, not maintaining it, not the utilities, from start to finish, zero taxpayers to the city. The Parkey is owned and operated, maintained, and constructed by Lamar at zero cost, again, to the taxpayers. It is designed to promote the city's vision with enhancements that complement the surrounding areas. And there could be multiple designs, which I will share with you moving forward on the next 4 slides. But the designs are purely at the city's discretion. I mean, if there's a certain area that the city feels one design would work, and then the other area, another design would be different, Lamar is completely open to that as well. And then the next few slides will have the designs on them that we've just came up with, something different that we wanted to share with you all, because I believe some folks have seen maybe some other designs that maybe not as tasteful, I guess. Each one of them has the Aurora logo. We've mocked these up just so that you can kind of see what they would look like throughout the town. We've incorporated some of Aurora's campaigns that they use to get their messaging out for certain events. Aurora also partners with Lamar on our traditional advertising space each year to promote their events as well. Perfect. Those are just some examples of other places where we have similar signs that we've just incorporated the city's branding to. The benefits, parkies provide the city with a dedicated slot to promote civic events and announcements. When I mention dedicated slot, a lot of folks believe that these digital communication devices can use many sponsorships, 100 sponsorships. Lamar only operates with 8 sponsorships opportunities, so that every 8th message is that person's sponsorship, and the city would utilize one of those. So after the city's messaging, 7 sponsorships would go through that device, and then the cities would populate on the 8th one. That is the most effective way for the communication to get out to the city. If you had it to where there was 20 messaging, you would have to sit there for a while till you saw your message again. Parkey provides a steady revenue stream to the city through these sales and sponsorships. Aurora has control over the messaging, giving the parkey is only on city property. So similar to the transit furniture that Aurora has on the right-of-way, whether it's the benches or the shelters, Aurora has control over the content that is produced on those street furnitures. So for instance, don't allow adult entertainment, don't allow adult products, don't allow political views. Those are already incorporated into the transit agreements, not just down in Aurora, but throughout Colorado. That's the traditional language. You could pull up the city of Fort Collins, city of Loveland. I mean, that's the standard. So you would have control over the content on the city message device. Potential locations, again, we are open. We're not married to any of these locations, but open to any. It could be vacant land, but it could be city-owned properties, sports fields, fire, police stations, detention facilities, anywhere where the city feels it would be a good fit to get their messaging out to the residents. These are size options. The one off to the right is what we call our poster option, which is a small sized, roughly 10 by 21 feet. There are larger size out there, but we're flexible and happy to work with staff on appropriate size depending on location, because I do realize some locations, if they're further off the road or the traffic has a higher volume, you might need a little bit larger sign so that people can get that message across. As I mentioned earlier, the city is allocated to 1 full slot in the digital cycle to use as it wishes. It could be used for delivery of public service announcements, promote upcoming events, celebrate holidays, honor veterans, and more. And when I say and more, it's limitless. I mean, if you had a position that you're looking to occupy, or a Aurora Police Department is hiring, that could be populated up there. Lamar already uses our faces, our digital faces, to promote Amber, not to promote, but to message Amber alerts, most wanted criminal activity. So we do that already. And we also have public service announcements as well, but the city would be able to use their 1 slot for whatever they choose to do so. These are just some examples of designs that I got from your website. So just wanted to show you a few examples. On the support side, the team that would be building and maintaining and promoting the parkey has over 150 years of combined experience in the outdoor digital sign industry. That's just in Colorado. Brent Window, who is on the call, the territory and general manager, he's almost at 30 years. I'm at 21. That's just 2 of us. We have a lot of folks on the Lamar team, but that's just locally. On the company side, and I'm probably getting ahead of myself because I believe it's one of the slides, we have a corporate office that helps us monitor these signs as well and helps maintain them. But that is the local support side of these city signs. The city will receive a licensing fee and a revenue share to be agreed upon by both the city and Lamar. In addition, the city will receive one of the 8 sponsorships, as I mentioned, to communicate the events. The projected annual, as you can see there, it's based off of 6 locations of our larger signs. And this dollar amount was populated roughly right around COVID when everything was falling apart. So I anticipate that would be, if we were to go with 6 locations, would be close to $1 million on the total value for the city of Aurora. But we are open, as it mentions there, we're open to a pilot program. So we're not fixed on 1 or 6 or 10 or whatever it is. It's if the city says let's try this pilot program, we think this would be the best location and see how it goes, we are completely open to that as well. And this is the corporate side of our help on these signs. So we have state-of-the-art LEDs. We replace those roughly every 7 years, just so that we stay up to date on the latest technology, which is dimming factors, so that it's never bright or overwhelming, I guess. So it dims on a cloudy day, it dims at night, it's dimming almost all the way down to less than, I think it's 10%, because that is when a lot of people think that these could be overwhelming. And that actually comes from on-premise digitals that don't have the right technology. And that is not how the out-of-home industry operates. The monitoring by our NOC is basically a huge dark room at our corporate office, and there's a team of people that are constantly viewing these monitors to see if anything is out or needs some service. And that could be an air vent that is used to keep these things cool. But it also could be part of it is black, and we need to get out there and change those. And we keep spare parts on all of our units so that we can typically change them out and fix them or repair them within the same day. All of this, again, is at zero cost to the city. So creating the artwork, maintaining it, anything. We are open to training a staff member or staff members so that they could slide their creative onto the schedule if they would like to do that. Or Lamar is here to help as needed as well, so that you don't have to do that in-house if you wouldn't like to. So in conclusion, Parkey's custom made. Whatever the city design thinks is necessary, we are open to. No cost to the city, no cost to the taxpayers, no maintenance. Free to use the space, and it has provides passive income. I truly believe that the communication part of it, getting whatever messaging out to the city, is more valuable than income, in my opinion. But the income is maybe the cherry on top, but the messaging is where the value is. And Peter or Brent, if I'm missing something, please feel free to step in. But that's the end of the presentation. And I'm sorry my video wouldn't work, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that. Councilmember Sundberg or Lawson, do you have any questions that you'd like to ask at this time?
Councilmember Françoise, Bergan, I just have a couple comments. I've seen the presentation before, and I think it's very promising. Messaging doesn't get across to a lot of our citizens by the water bill or our social media or Channel 8. So I think this could really fill a gap. It'd be hard to avoid not seeing certain messaging on this. For example, this month is Black History Month. That could be announced. Last month was MLK events. And, our animal shelter is even giving away free pet vaccinations. And how are people supposed to know about stuff like that? Free smoke detectors. There's really a plethora of opportunities here. The panhandling campaign, for example. I was wondering, though, what types of advertising are typically placed across these screens? What companies? Could you answer that question, please?
Yeah, it varies, but attorneys, home builders, car dealerships, restaurants, it's endless. Of course, any potential partnership or sponsorship, it would have to be within the city's guidelines. But yeah, it could vary. It could be for the Denver Nuggets. It could be for Avalanche. There's so many sponsorships that we use that are advertising right now that would populate a city communication device in Aurora fairly quickly. We're confident that we would have pretty high occupancy.
And I think one of your slides indicated we'd have one slot available. What does that mean?
So each each digital face is programmed to have 8 sponsorships. We remove one of those, so then we have 7 sponsorships, and we allocate that 8th one to the city. So that 8th one would be used as the city needs. The city's message would populate, let's say, on the first slot, and then it would go through every 8 seconds. So the messaging stays on each slot for 8 seconds. CDOT's guidelines are 4 seconds. We actually keep it static for even longer, 8 seconds. Then it goes to slot 2 for 8 seconds, so on and so forth. And then it comes back to the city of Aurora slot. If at any time one of those other 7 slots are not sponsored, then it rotates quicker. So then it gets to your slot faster, because if there's only 5 sponsorships, then it gets to yours on the 6th slot, not the 8th.
And that one slot can be a different message at different times of the day, or are we sticking with?
Oh no, it could be one message right now, and 8 seconds later, it's a different message.
Okay.
And what happens is the city has what we call a library, or each sponsorship has a library. We don't give clients typically access to the library because we like to control the content, but the city would have that option because it's a city communication device for you all. And you would have a library and you would plug them in. You could put, as many as you would like onto that rotation.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Councilmember Lawson, do you have any questions?
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Bergan. I saw this presentation. I think it's a good idea. The question I have for you, and I think I wanted to, within the one slot that we have, I just wanted to make sure clear, we can determine what the messaging is. That's even if, for example, if there's a major traffic jam on Chambers Road, for example, and we're backed up, but we're there's something there that could say, hey, hazard ahead or something, if it's a real detriment. Can it be those type of messagings as well with our one slot if the city decides to do so?
Absolutely. Yeah, you would have, we would have what we call a template it would be an artwork template that you could write in any message, so that you don't have to create the new template every time. You just have to change the typing or the language or the verbiage in there. So it could say, avoid the right lane ahead, or avoid this intersection. It could say whatever you like. So the town of Larkspur, it's not at Parkey, but it's close. But they utilize the signs that in the town of Larkspur for that.
Okay. And then my second question is, a lot of people, they're in the, society sometimes thinks, well, does these have cameras watching our license plates? And so what is that? I know it doesn't do that, but I just wanted you to say it out loud that that's not what this is for. It's not doing that, because people do look at those type of things that when they're looking at these anything that's kind of showing face front and you're driving through it or wherever you're passing by something. So curiosity, I guess.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. And I wish I could share my second screen because I could show you a real life view of one right now. But so the camera that we use to monitor these to make sure they're performing at the highest standard is angled directly at the screen. So it is not angled up or on the sidewalk or out to the street. It only sees the screen. And they are either mounted at the bottom or at the top. But yes, they are angled just at the screen. And you would be able to have access to that as well. At any time, you would be able to look at the webcam.
So I have a question. So I also saw the presentation, but I recall you had a slide in what I saw before was like a monument that the sign goes on, correct? So I mean, it's permanent.
It is permanent. Yeah, the structure is permanent. We remove those if and when the partnership would end. Yes, the structure would be permanent. It weighs quite a bit. They're extremely heavy. So yes, and some of the folks that saw some of the pictures similar to what you're referring to, we just wanted to refresh the images so that you could see kind of a different option to these signs. So there are so many different design options, but yes, they are permanent.
And so on that point, in terms of if the city has particular architectural standards in our city, those would apply. You would match our architectural standards, for example.
Correct.
Okay, and so I guess on the, and I'm glad to hear that it's every 8 seconds and not every 4 seconds, because I think, you know, you're driving and by the time you drive by, that's gone.
Yeah.
And so it's on city-owned property, so be at a library or be at our fire stations or whatnot. You know, I was curious because Councilmember Lawson mentioned traffic, but that obviously we're really not going, unless it's situated on an intersection, which may not necessarily be public property, then that wouldn't work, right?
So if we're talking about a library or fire station, it would be typically it would be on that parcel, as close to the sidewalk or curb. So
Okay.
it doesn't have to be at an intersection.
Okay.
You know, but it can be somewhere located to where it's visible for traffic. If it's just visible for people parking in the parking lot at the library, it wouldn't be a great utilization of a city communication device.
Okay, so we would really want to take a look at what makes the most sense of locations for visibility and traffic volume and that type of thing.
Correct. Yep.
Okay, and then I kind of like the pilot program idea, just you know, to see how it would work. I know we're going to have a presentation following this from our staff just on some concerns on messaging and that type of thing. But I kind of like the idea of a pilot program just to start with one, see how that works. How quickly would this program be up and running?
If we start with a pilot program that just requires local city approval, so not on a CDOT controlled route, from the time that we put our order in, and I would say we're probably around the 6-month range.
Okay.
Before we get all the materials, get everything built. Sometimes bringing power to these locations could be lengthy, but just because Excel or whoever the power company is at that
Oh, well,
location.
you might be waiting a year. No, I'm just kidding.
You know, they take a little while, but we placed an order to refurbish some of ours in northern Colorado, and I think it was 3 months. So I don't want to commit to something that quick, but I would say around 6 months.
Okay. Any further questions? Okay. Thank you so much. And Janine, do you want to go ahead and go, and we'll open it up for questions after Janine as well.
Yes, thank you. And Crystal, if you could share the city PowerPoint while she's getting that up. Janine Rustad, Director of Planning and Development Services. Next slide. In your backup, we did outline several concerns, and we had carried over from when we thought we were going to have this in January. In the interim, we did have the opportunity to meet with Lamar and Wall Group, and some of these concerns were getting closer to some answers. So as I go through each of these, I'll update where we are. Next slide. So first is our zoning. The UDO does place restrictions on location, the size and type of signs. Lamar Group did share with us draft UDO language. That language honestly is very specific to their type of signs. They also shared with us Parker that exempts certain government signs. I think we would look to some sort of hybrid so that we could control what goes on government property. Also, Public Works had some concerns where if these were put in right of way, but none of the locations suggested were right of way. And we could also craft the UDO to make sure that we did not allow these in right of way. Next slide. So sorry, I covered that. And as you go through, you'll see that I did steal, they shared images with us. The first presentation they shared with us, these were huge, very tall signs that didn't come close to meeting our size requirements. We expressed that concern, and this is what they've come back with us, back to for us. Next slide. So the contracting, we've worked with real estate. They recommend a lease over a license. The department, we would coordinate between public works, real estate, planning, and other departments on locations, of course, if we're talking fire or parks, with those departments as well. We have been advised both through legal and real estate that this would have to be under our contracting regulations, a competitive process. And then any lease proposal would come back to council for approval. Next slide. So I will turn this over to our legal counsel to cover this.
Good morning. So given that the city has control over the messaging here, it's not quite so simple to say that we can just control the content because, of course, being the government, the First Amendment applies to us. I haven't seen the language yet in the agreement, but it's likely that these would be viewed as a public forum. Basically, we're opening it up to the public to put their message there, meaning the city can only set very limited restrictions on what those messages might be. So, for example, they must be content neutral and they have to be viewpoint neutral. So, for example, you know, if someone wanted to put up an anti-City of Aurora, anti-APD message, I don't think we can say no to that. We'd have to allow it most likely. Any limits we do set on the content of the messages or the speakers potentially opens us up to liability for constitutional violations. On the other hand, if we don't exercise control over the messages, we do face potential, you know, PR issues and political issues because these would be heavily associated with the city, right? On city property, city logos, city messages. We're getting money from these signs, and there could be things that the citizens of Aurora don't particularly care for on those signs. So those are concerns that we would have to keep in mind when entering into this sort of an agreement.
So really
Thank you. Next slide. So the questions for PED, one, is whether you want to move forward with exploring options for this type of digital sign on city property. Questions that we'd have to dive deeper into is looking at the UDO, how we could carve out an exception to allow these, but also ensuring that we didn't open up right of way and billboards throughout the city. My understanding is several years ago that the council decided they did not want billboards throughout the city. We'd have to work out details such as the size that we would want to allow. Again, you just heard from Kim, we'd want to work out more of these constitutional issues. And then as you've seen the potential revenues, what we would need to do that next is work with staff to look at the offset, because this is going to take staff and legal time to monitor messaging and make sure that we're staying above board.
I have a question on the content and the constitutionality issue. If it's on our property, we own basically the monument and the messaging. Why would that be different than other forms of communication? Well, maybe I should ask this. Do we have anything in the city where we allow advertisers to advertise with us? Like on the website or in public events?
You do on your bus shelters and benches. And
Yeah.
so that and Kim, I'm not sure, I don't have the language in front of me, but I believe there is some content control on those shelters and benches.
I don't oversee that. I'm happy to research it, but Councilmember Bergan, we do not take advertising for that reason, because then we do have a much more difficult situation. The only exception is with Channel 8. There are some very limited public service type announcements that happen there, and they're mostly for the public benefit, like there's an election coming up, vote. So beyond that, we do not take advertising because we can't select, as Kimberly Skaggs said, we can't choose content and control that. And we have had challenges in the past in other applications at the city. Some very unsavory groups, KKK. We have to have a very, very, very level playing field. So we don't open that door.
So if it was a public service announcement from an organization, but it was that we could accept possibly?
I'm gonna let Kimberly speak to that, but a public service announcement has a very specific a definition, if you will.
Yeah, so there are times where you can set up what's called a limited public forum and have a forum with a very specific purpose. And that's an option we could explore, but to use Kim Stewart's example, if a local KKK group has a public service announcement, I don't think we can turn them away if it fits the definition, right? So it's something we would have to look at very, very closely.
So really quick on content, just so that you can understand where Lamar standards are. We would never advertise a KKK negative messaging. That is, we're not in the partnership to do that. We've been in business since 1902, and we are there to help the municipalities and the cities that we partner with. So we are not going to put up an anti-Aurora, a KKK, and I understand that there may be some dotting of the I's and crossing of the T's to ensure that that takes place, but Lamar will not be promoting or messaging anything that negatively impacts the city.
Okay.
And Steve, this is Dan Money with the city attorney's office. Who makes that decision of what's negative? Because if these advertisements are part city business and part private, and some private group, private business that half of society loves and half of the society hates, who makes that decision of whether or not they get to advertise?
So we, on a local level, it would be our general manager and our territory manager who oversees multiple states. When there's kind of a gray area, then we get our corporate officials to help us out, and that is when also that we would ensure and communicate with the city as well.
And I see Councilmember Lawson, you have a question.
Yes, thank you. So I have a question, and I'm just trying to maybe see what the distinction is. When you go down Arapahoe Road and you go to the city of Centennial, when you travel down there, you see I don't know if it's one of these, but they have something like this, like meet with mayor. They have like certain election dates. And they have one of these things that kind of do the flashing on I think it's their property. I guess what's the difference with what they're doing if you go down Arapahoe Road and you do see that marquee, because it does say visit, Mayor Pico. I'm just saying you do see that, or they have different messaging. I don't know every time when I go down there, but I do see it. What's the difference in what they're doing and if this was on city property from their messaging? I'm just trying to understand.
I think the Centennial one is only Centennial. It's not outside advertisers, but
okay,
maybe.
But they're also saying too, I guess I may need clarification. If we put this on the city of Aurora property, like near the city building, is that what the distinction would be? Still, people could put whatever they want to do. We couldn't control the messaging. I'm just trying to understand if we put it on our property. Oh, I know, Mayor Pro Tem. I'm just Councilmember Bergan, I'm just trying to understand the distinction. I know theirs is on their property, but.
Right. I was just going to say, I think we would be allowing 7 other advertisers that are not city communications, whereas and maybe the attorneys can, or somebody can clarify, whereas Centennial, it's all Centennial content, I think. Somebody know?
I don't know if there's continuous content or not. When I go down there, they do advertise some things maybe pertaining to the city. So maybe there is a distinction there. So,
and I think the way this stays revenue neutral or we get money is because of those 7 other advertising slots versus if we were to install a sign that just had city messaging, we would be responsible for the full cost and not get any revenue.
Does that help, Councilmember Lawson? Or do you want further clarification?
And another thing really quick is Lamar can agree to not put certain things on there to where it is Lamar saying we won't. It's not saying the city requires it. So our licensee agreement or lease, as you mentioned, we can shoulder that if there is any concern from the city to where it's not a requirement by the city.
Councilmember Bergan,
Yes, go ahead, Councilmember Sundberg.
this would be for Kim, and Kim, I believe we receive as council members an Aurora Communications report, typically from Kim Stewart, and it summarizes what goes out in our social media. You know, for example, I'm looking at, this says save the date for the next animal vaccine clinic, or the world in a city at the Stanley Marketplace. So currently with this, are there guidelines that we have within the city for what we post upon our social media outlets? And could these same guidelines apply here?
What we post on social are city generated and city referenced only. So we're not getting outside sources. We do have a policy, it's on our website and our social media, and we work a lot with legal on, it's really more a matter of the responses we get and what can be removed. We have a very strict practice of trying never to remove interaction with social media, which is more of the public facing because it is a public forum. And we call Kimberly a lot to seek advice. There are very, very limited times where we can remove something. What we post is either from the city, from quasi-governmental agencies, formal city partners. I'll give you an example. There was a proclamation earlier this year to make Aurora the first Donate Life city in the state of Colorado. So that's a formal partnership, if you will. And we are able to talk about the work that they're doing. They had a blood drive, for instance, we could promote that. Otherwise, it is all city-specific information that we're pushing out. Does that answer your question?
I believe so.
Okay.
So there could be some room for some gray controversial material there if there's a city partnership, perhaps.
So,
Theoretically, but Kimberly, go ahead. Sorry.
and Kim, as I understand it, for our social media, we control the message 100%. We may promote our partners, but we also have full editorial control. So if our partner were to say, "Hey, send out this message," we say 100% absolutely not, because this is government speech. This is the city of Aurora speaking, and that's the difference. When it's the city speaking, we can say whatever we want or stay silent. With these signs, it would have to be extremely limited in order to make it government speech, to the point where I think revenue would be curtailed, and I would question whether Lamar would want to partner with us if we made it fully government speech, because we would fully control all messages. All 8 slots would be controlled by Aurora.
And Councilmember Sundberg, the same goes true with our Aurora TV. We have full editorial control. So we can do stories on other things, but it's the city who determines all of the content, which does not open the door. It's not public access, it's government TV. So that applies to our social, our web, and our TV.
Okay, thank you. I mean, this could help as a guideline, perhaps, but also have inadvertent restrictions, it sounds like.
Further questions?
Council member, may I say something?
Yes.
I do want to acknowledge Steve because he's been very clear since we first met and talked. They really do want to be good partners if this moves ahead, and we can address the details. In terms of, and this is maybe something legal wants to speak to, if it's a Lamar that says we won't accept alcohol, firearms, tobacco, XYZ, limit a number of things that would be obviously problematic. If they're the ones making those decisions, does that still put a liability on the city would be my only question.
Okay.
Potentially it would, and I don't want to get too far into the weeds on legal advice in a public forum, but I don't know that provides much cover for the city. if it's an option that we have to either say yes or no to, because it's still the city taking action there.
Further questions? Oh gosh, I mean, this is, I mean, it sounds like a great idea. I completely understand the content constitutionality issue that we're facing. And Steve, how would you select who gets to advertise? Because you said you would have control over that portion of it.
So it would be a supply and demand, really. So we have folks contacting us daily, looking for messaging throughout the city of Aurora and other cities as well. And so those messages or campaigns or sponsorships have to follow Lamar's guidelines, and we have our own internal guidelines. I'm not sure. I'd have to get approval to share those with you, but we it would be a supply and demand. So, for instance, we've had some folks during some not so great days of rioting and COVID, and that have wanted to put up certain messaging, and we have denied those messages. So, without sharing our guidelines, I mean, we would control that, and there is a lot of sponsorships that would like to be in City of Aurora, and all of them we feel would benefit the city.
And so if let's say it's a car dealership that's promoting, and they get in right away and buy, I don't know, a whole year's worth of advertisement. Do you ever have issues with then a competitor saying, you know, the city, it's on city property, and yet whatever dealership has basically monopolized it and we can't get in? Or, I mean, do you have like multiple competitors on the same, you know what I'm saying, on the same cycle?
Yeah. So yeah, basically is, you know, if there's a Kia dealership and then there's a Ford dealership on slot 3, so 2 and 3 are dealerships. If one of those sponsor the city of Aurora on more than one slot, then they would have to pay that rate that would allow them to be guaranteed on that slot. So there are multiple sales options that we provide to help generate revenue for the city. Some of those we call preemptible. So if there is an available slot, we say, here's a discounted rate. As soon as someone pays full rate, you're bumped. If someone says, well, I want the slot that Ford dealership is on, we say their contract is expiring on this date. You're welcome to sign an agreement when that contract expires, and then they would populate that. But we try and be as fair as possible. We do not want to have any conflicts with our advertisers and sponsorships. Our goal is to not be a burden to these sponsorships. It's something we are there to help them. So we have many locations, just to give you an idea, where we have what we call side-by-side signs. So they're 2 separate messages, and we never put a McDonald's and then a Burger King. We just don't do that. We don't have the same type of business next to each other. But we make every effort possible to help not only the sponsors, but the city as well.
Okay. Any other questions, council members?
Councilmember Bergan, this is Councilmember Jurinski. Can I speak?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Steve, you guys are currently operating these signs in other cities across the country. Am I correct?
Yep, you are correct.
Okay. And so obviously those cities find benefit in this. I mean, you guys have been in business since 1902. It doesn't seem like this was, you know, a way of advertising just thought up that you guys are a fly-by-night company. Seems very established to be in business since 1902. And you know, it's interesting because Aurora has put a really big emphasis, and especially the council now has put a really big emphasis on trying to get through red tape. And somehow you guys are currently operating in other cities. And I'm quite certain that in those cities, there aren't messaging, for KKK, local KKK groups, um, and things like that. So maybe, I don't know, Steve, do you think maybe our legal team should have a conversation with the legal teams in some of those cities, and see how they're able to do this without a whole bunch of KKK advertising? What do you think, Steve?
Yeah, absolutely. Our team is available for the city of Aurora staff and attorneys. We're here to help, and my goal is to not give the city any additional work that would be required to help. But yes, we would be open to introducing whoever you would like with our team and with the municipalities in which we partner with. We would definitely be open to that.
Sure.
I would
Thank you.
say
So
that
I think first, I think I was the first one maybe that started talking to you guys. I think this is great. I think in too many instances, the city of Aurora lets too many opportunities go by to generate revenue and in some ways to operate as a business. I think we let a lot of missed opportunities go by. And like I said, this is an established company, been in business since 1902, currently operating this type of advertising in other cities. It cannot possibly be the city of Aurora that has so many issues and so many KKK groups and so many firearms advertisers that we can't make this work. So I would ask my colleagues to really consider moving this out of committee for further discussion. And I'm personally happy to work with Lamar to coordinate meetings and discussions with these other cities' legal departments and ours, and see where the interpretation comes to have this to have this advertising without all of this liability. I would ask my colleagues to please move this forward.
So my suggestion would be for staff, our legal team, to talk to, as you suggested, to some of these other jurisdictions. And I mean, obviously, if they are doing it, they have probably had to address this as well. So that would be my suggestion, is that we would get our legal team to maybe have that communication and get some of these things clarified for us. Is that Kim? Are you still there?
I can certainly speak to other cities, yes.
Okay, so so if you are able to, is it possible for you to then get back to us with some of those, if it can be resolved before we completely move forward? And I don't know if we're going to do pilot program or how we want to move this forward.
Councilmember Bergan, may I ask when our next study session is? Are we one delayed, or?
It's March 6th, I believe.
March 6th, okay. Is that enough time if we wanted to move this to study session and have legal fill us in at that time? Just as an option?
Yeah, that sounds reasonable. Kim, would you be able to, that gives about 3 weeks.
Sure. I think that would be fine. It would just depend on the availability of the other cities. And just to be clear, I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm saying you have to balance your interests here. So you might take on the risk or of legal risk, or you might take on the PR risk. I don't know that, you can set the balance a certain way, but there's going to be risk on either side, either way. And I can talk to the cities that have already had these signs and see how maybe they've found it best to balance those risks.
Okay. Councilmember Lawson, would you be good with legal having that communication coming back to us at a study session?
Yes.
Councilmember Sundberg?
I'm fine with that, yes.
Okay, then that sounds like the direction.
Perfect.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you all.
Thank you, everyone, for the time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank
Have a
you,
good
Peter.
day, and we'll move on to the next item, which is the data center infrastructure discussion.
Waiting for Andrea to come up. Just a little introduction. Again, Janine Rustad, Director of Planning Development Services. I've been talking to AEDC for about 6 or 7 months now. Really appreciate Yuri's input on helping understand how we right-size data as infrastructure to support our existing and hopefully future industry. Because just as with roads and pipes, we want to make sure that we hit it right to support what we have internally, not become the data center farms. I bring some experience from another jurisdiction that had large industry and also grappled with this. So Andrea.
Yes, good morning, Council. Yuri Gorlov from the Aurora Economic Development Council is here to talk to you about data centers, the infrastructure they provide for our community, and additional requirements that you may want. As some of you will recall, we early on, several years ago, Council decided to create an incentive to bring data centers to Aurora. And so at this point, having been implementing that, I think a little more discussion on that is called for. Yuri?
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, Janine. Thank you, committee members, for giving me some time to talk about this. So yeah, we've been, as Andrea alluded to, on sort of an education campaign for a bit now, probably a couple of years. We started really thinking about the industry when we were able to attract JP Morgan Chase in one of their facilities back in 2016. To just give you some perspective on how intensive that process is to put a data center up. So, you know, over the last, especially decade, even longer, right, the industry has been growing exponentially, really, across the country. At this point, about 40 states, plus or minus, offer statewide incentives to attract the industry. And there's a lot of ancillary development that goes along with that, a lot of economic impact. And so we've been trying to wrap our heads around that and talk to different communities, different states, different industry groups. In fact, 3 years ago to this day, I presented to a group here locally to talk about the fiber and the power and the water and the land / entitlement process that we have to offer to attract more of these facilities. Now we have dozens of them across the metro area. There's co-location centers, there's enterprise solution centers, there's hyperscale data centers, and that's probably what we hear in the headlines, right, of Meta or Google or any of these kind of Cisco or, you know, larger IT companies planting their facilities across the country. But there's a lot of other data centers around here. Aurora has a few others. One's right across from the Point redevelopment right there at Peoria and Parker. And some of them sit in office buildings. Some of them sit in more flex industrial facilities. And I think where we're going is, you know, they're becoming more dense and perhaps more vertical. I know that was a question that was brought up at previous either committee meetings or maybe even study sessions of if data centers could be multi-storied. Certainly the case. There usually are, at least here, right, in an outer ring city like Aurora, they would be one level, one story facility, but certainly have the ability to go vertical a little bit. And so anyway, that's just for context. We've attracted 2 operations just last year. They came in because partially of the incentive program that council approved in 2020. And so we're really excited about having those two operations coming into the city. Janine helped with both of those, so kudos to her team there. And they're still in the planning phases and the development phase of those. But we really wanted to talk about, and I think I've talked to most council about a lot of the pros of the industry, right? And having these data centers, they don't burden the local resources as much, right? And that's tied to the level of jobs, which is a little bit of a misnomer that it doesn't create a lot of jobs. And so why would it be important, right? But the jobs it does create, be it 10, be it 20, be it 100 sometimes, if it's a larger scale data centers, has a ripple effect, right? And the supply chain that comes with it creates hundreds of jobs. So there's multiple national studies out there by chambers of commerces and other industry groups that summarize, on an average, a data center will create tens of millions of dollars of economic impact annually, right? After the construction and everything's up and running, it'll create tens of millions of dollars potentially in new tax revenues to the city. And that's where we really were trying to, especially in 2020, focus on tax generation to the city, right? And what industries we could bring in that are really recession proof, that really talk to the sustainability of corporate kind of ESG stuff, because they do care about being efficient and sustainable and being good with their water. And so there's multiple models. Also, I think a misnomer is that they do take a lot of water and a lot of power. Power, yes, and that's a good thing. We've been working closely with Xcel Energy, and they want all these data centers here because they want to provide them the power to then keep the renewable energy rates going and helping the other side of their business, being the residential side, and keeping those rates like they are. And I'm definitely not an expert in getting into those rate structures, but Xcel is definitely in favor of this. And on the waterfront, they've created closed loop systems, and a lot of them are air cooled now instead of water cooled now. And a lot of those facilities that would come to Colorado would certainly look at air cooling, given that we only have a few days. Hopefully we can stick to that of high 90-degree weather in the summers, the rest of the remainder of the year being relatively cooler. And so with the jobs and the ripple effect there, with the capital investment, which could be billions of dollars at a time, the tax revenues, like I said, tens of millions of dollars at a time, the sustainability aspect of it, the fiber aspect of it, and that's where this conversation gets into the infrastructure piece of it. If we don't continue attracting data centers in Aurora, in the metro area, in Colorado, the fiber network that this country is continuing to build out to support industries and 5G, 6G, all the IoT stuff, all the AI stuff that we're hearing about. The film industry, there was a task force last legislative session that was formed to talk about digital marketing and filming of productions, of shows, of movies. All of that takes bandwidth, right? All of that takes data. And everything that we're doing right now on a screen takes a lot more data. And so the industry is growing at a very high, it's called CAGR, compounded annual growth rate. And that's just kind of a measurement over a period of time. It's not necessarily an annualized rate of growth, but an overall rate of growth. And it's growing really fast. There's a lot of investment going into the industry. And there are some headwinds, right? It's not as easy to develop data centers as it was probably 10 years ago because there's so much competition. There's so much attention to it. There's a lot that goes into locating data centers. And so we just want to be part of the conversation, right? And be at the table to attract those industries. And I think where this really applies to the committee and the city's planning efforts is, those ancillary industries that we're targeting. And again, aerospace industry relies heavily on data centers. We're talking to Raytheon right now, whether they continue to have host servers at their facilities or if they outsource them, right? And same with bioscience and healthcare. There's more and more robotics in surgeries and in research and in laboratory spaces. all of that takes data going back and forth, and redundancies are important to those industries because it has to be quick. And then obviously the logistics industry and all the other industries that we have in Aurora rely heavily on data. And so as the infrastructure piece, again, getting to that, it's really a matter of being able to plan accordingly to host, whether it's a 30,000 square foot facility, right, that wants to go behind an industrial building, and they can set up and tap into the power and tap into the fiber lines, or if it's a 300-acre campus, and which we are talking to several groups that are looking for hundreds of acres at a time. So it's a broad range of scope that these projects could be. And so I think land planning wise and land use wise, I think that was just part of the planning department's request to come and talk with you about that and just inform you a little bit of everything that's tied to data these days, right? And how important it is for us to continue to accommodate that use. And that's a perfect example of that was when the UDO was changed last, I think, December, just a couple months ago, right, with the parking requirement changes and all of that the council approved a couple months ago to allow more flexibility for data centers to go into different zoning areas. So I will stop there, and I don't know if staff wanted to add anything to my information, or if I don't think there was really a question to the committee from my end, but it was just more informational.
Janine, do you have anything to add before we open it up for questions?
I have nothing to add. Just thank you, Yuri, for the ongoing partnership and helping me understand and bringing this to PED.
Questions from Councilmember Lawson or Councilmember Sundberg?
Not yet. Thank you.
Councilmember
Councilmember
Bergan,
Lawson?
I have a question. So, Yuri, I understand the importance of data centers, and I definitely, also living in the Bay Area myself, I definitely don't want to be like this data center, just all these data centers that we have just being known for that. And so, I guess when I'm looking at the minimum jobs created, like you're saying about 10. If I would like to see if we were going to do this, maybe the jobs could be above 10, definitely, to at least, and not have, so we wouldn't have so many. The reasons why I bring this up is, I mean, we're trying to get fiber to the community inside our city, and then yet and still we would go out there to do this. And I just wanted to know if there would be if that's a consideration, what kind of what are they going to bring to the game of bringing fiber if we're going to put all these data centers or even a large one into this? Because we talk about water, we talk about all this growth, we talk about all this stuff that we need to do, but what is their skin in the game in terms of what they're going to be contributing to this fiber network and this electricity and this water? We have what we want to do with water on this end, but then we're going to put the data center out there that's going to require water. It just seems to me like we're saying one thing, but we're kind of doing this. So I would like to know what are they going to be contributing? If we allow them to come into the city and it's a good partnership, what are they going to be contributing to this infrastructure? I would really like to know that before, if I'm on the council, to approve anything like this. I think that they're significant. I don't want to be a data world, a data center world, because some of these may go out of business or they might merge with other ones. And then we got all this open space and all these things, But I guess the question for me is what is going to be their contribution in the infrastructure and all of this stuff that we're trying to create to make sure that they're viable here and that they are viable for the city of Aurora. And I'm going even beyond what, I understand we're looking at what they can bring in terms of revenue to the city, but how do we balance that revenue versus what's the cost going to be or the impact's going to be on the city?
Great question,
Oh,
Council
sorry,
Member.
that's a lot of stuff in there.
Yeah.
But I'm just trying to equate it all
address
into
that.
one.
Yeah, I'll try to address as much as I can. So I think at the core of it, when these data centers look at an area, they look at the power, they look at the fiber, they look at the infrastructure that is in place, and they don't make a decision. They wouldn't go out to the middle, of the northeast kind of portion of Aurora that's, still has some pockets of non yet to be activated land and say, yep, we want to locate right here. They're going to go into areas where the transmission lines are there, the roads are there, and then they would bring the fiber and whatever infrastructure they would need, right? Development pays for itself, and they would bring that if they would need to improve or extend or any of that in terms of fiber and water lines and all of that. So, it's a win-win in a way, because they're requiring resources, right? Like the water and the power, but they're paying for it, and they're paying for more of it to come into the city. And the more that we have of all of those sort of infrastructure and resources, the more other industries will react to seeing that and say, oh, great, that's a well-developed area out there. We can put, a campus of our own out there. And whether it's an R&D factory or manufacturing factory or a corporate headquarters or whatever that is, that's the ancillary spin-off of that. Does that make sense?
So I share of some of the concerns that Councilmember Lawson brought up. And I understand, we want to attract these data centers to Aurora. However, I really kind of have an issue with the 75%. I know that this would have to come to council to approve any kind of incentive, but when you say capital investment, most of our tax revenue comes from obviously sales and use taxes. So if we're going to give a 75% rebate on, really, that's where we get our revenue. We only get 10% of property taxes. So we're going to be looking to get the tax revenue to the city on the use taxes. So I kind of have an issue on that 75% personally. The water, you said they're going to pay for it. So they would pay for the lift stations. They would pay for extending pipelines. And
They would pay. I'm not clear about off-site improvements. That's something that I'll defer to if anybody here from Public Works is on or the Water Department is on. But yeah, most of the development that they would need, all the resources adjacent to their property, they would pay for, right?
Okay, because I mean, we heard from Marshall yesterday at AEDC, but we also have heard, just Monday night even about having to put a surcharge on our residents for water usage and so forth. So I am cognizant of the water use, because it's not just that they're going to pay for it, like what, if they're paying for it with the tap fees, but for me, it's also the water consumption. And the more we're expending consumption on one side, then we're telling our residents, hey, you can't have turf in your yards. You must reduce your water use, or we're gonna surcharge you. And so from that perspective, I think we have to balance. I guess I'm getting at
that's a great point.
When you look at a prospect, you're taking all that into consideration before you come forward with a request for an incentive.
We talk with Marshall and his team about all of that, and a lot of it is non-consumptive water, and that's part of the loop system, right? So a lot of it just kind of goes in and is recycled a lot, right? So that's part of it. And yeah, we talk to Marshall and his team about every prospect we look at and make sure that the cost, that the pricing and the cost that they're charging for the tap fees for the flow is commensurate with what the development, because it's all an enterprise fund, right? As I understand it, again, I'm not the expert there, but everything that the water department charges for that water service, it goes back into the capital improvements plan, hence funding other lift stations or other pipelines or whatever else that they need, right? So it's kind of a loop in and of itself. So I hear you on that, and that's a great point. And on the incentive policy piece, the 75%, sure, that's again to council's approval, right? It's
right.
If we don't, if the project doesn't qualify for whatever other reason, we wouldn't recommend it. If it does, that's obviously a conversation for council. Those are just that's the framework for, you know, if it's a larger capital investment and it's more jobs and it's more of everything, then that tax rebate goes back. But just to keep in mind, I want to clarify, right? If it's, you know, if it's generating $30 million of new taxes over the first 10 years, and let's say 20 to $23 million goes back to the company and the development to make it happen, the city's still net positive. Let's call it $7 million from that investment over the first 10 years. And then that goes away, right? And
Right.
then from there on out, when they're replacing those servers and updating, you know, infrastructure, their own infrastructure, and adding to those modular buildings, that's all then coming
Right.
into the
That
city.
first 10 years is critical because that's when they spend the most money, obviously putting the building up. And
Construction wise, yes, but not ongoing
Yeah.
cost wise.
Right, right. Okay. Other questions? Okay. Thank you so much. This was information only.
Correct. Thanks a lot.
Okay, so next we have miscellaneous, and we're going to go through actually AUDC. It says no report. Do you have a report?
I think I'm all right. Yeah, I'll save it
Okay.
till next time. Thanks.
I think, Gary. Havana Business Improvement District also says no report. Chance, are you on?
Chance is not on. She just wanted to provide the updates that are in the packet.
Okay, very good. And I think Aurora Chamber of Commerce also no report. Okay, Planning Commission, Becky, I think you have a report.
We do. We recently changed our chair and vice chair on Planning Commission. Thank you to Melvin, who is on this, as well as Gail for doing an outstanding job. We just have felt that we wanted to provide opportunity and experience for all the commissioners. So we rotate that. This year, Garrett Walls is chair. I am vice chair. We have a meeting tomorrow evening, one topic in Ward 6. So that's it for my report.
All right, thank you, Becky. Brad, oil and gas also, do you have anything to add? You have no report on the.
Yeah, I have no report, but we still do have a vacancy for an industry position. So I think the communications department, Jeffrey Moore, has asked the communications department to promote this vacancy for an industry member. So that's all I have for today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Brad. Retail, Bob?
Yeah, we're up next month for the full report.
Yes, I'm looking forward to it. Thank you. And Marcia McGilly, I think you have a report.
I do. Thank you, Councilmember Bergan. I wanted to talk today a little bit about, let's see if I can share. Yep, there we can. The year-end numbers for the Small Business Development Center they have been, is this better? Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. They were released. Close that. So the clients, businesses, exceeded all the goals for the SBA requirement. We are still well above what a normal year was. Since COVID, it has not slowed down. So number of clients, 639 sessions over 1,800. You can see the SBA goal in the parentheses following. We did 769 webinars and events in 2022 with 900 attendees. And still we're doing very close to 5,000 or more referrals. Just very, very busy still. And citizens are getting lots of assistance. Second, I'd like to talk about the economic impact. 126 jobs created and 156 jobs retained. As you can see, citizens are blowing our goals out of the water, which is awesome. Capital formation, 11.2 million this last year. Increase in sales, 24 million. So the businesses that are succeeding very well and well above our expectations and goals. There are still businesses suffering deeply and that are closing. And then government contracts, 20 million, big big year in government contracts being received by citizens as well. And finally, I always want to talk about client satisfaction. Again, they report after each session of training and consulting, 97% out of 100 satisfaction in consulting and 96% on training. Two others, are there any questions on those numbers?
No, great job.
Well, thank you. I just have two other short things to update you on. Our Spanish language childcare class is about in the middle of the course. It is a co-op class for, we have groups of individuals wanting to start childcare co-ops, so that we made it a very specific program this time. 15 individuals registered, and we have 11 that are sort of continuing in the class. We generally have a dropout in childcare because they're so busy all day, and then it's a night class. Finally, I wanted to let you know that the Office of Economic Development and International Trade did hire a new state Small Business Development Center director. So that is the state leader. We're very happy. We met her on our last call, and it's Hannah Krieger. She was the president of, or she was the executive director of, and now I have to close this because I lost her title. Hold on. Of something mentor. Goodness. Where is it? Escape. Did escape. There we go. Of Mentor Colorado, and it was a youth mentor program, and she's very good at raising national funding and state funding, which might help us not have to raise so much money and do more services. So we're very excited about Hannah Krieger, and that's all I have today, unless there's any questions.
Are there any questions? No. Councilmember Sundberg, no? Okay, thank you so much.
No questions, thank you.
Oh, thank you. And then lastly, I think we have Visit Aurora, no report, or unless, Bruce, unless you have something to add.
No report, thank you.
Thank you. And I think that's it. Our next meeting is on March 8th, I believe.
Councilmember Bergan?
Oh, yes.
I'm sorry to bother you. I know that I had talked to you a little bit outside this meeting. If there's a possible way we could get a presentation and update on opportunity zones, either in March or April, I would really appreciate that. I've been getting some questions from the community about where has that been? What is the city of Aurora doing? What's been the impact? Has it really served the individuals or businesses that it was supposed to? So if we can't do it in March, if it's possible, we could add that maybe to the agenda for April. I would greatly appreciate that, or ask for you to consider that.
Yeah, that would be a great idea. Janine, would we be able to add that in April? I know March is retail, so I don't know how full that agenda is or not.
I think April would be better to allow staff some time to pull information together, if that's okay.
Okay. Is that good, Councilmember Lawson, for April?
That would be perfect. Thank you.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think that's a good idea. We haven't had an update in quite a while, so that's very good. Anything else from staff or council members? Okay, I think that's it. Meeting adjourned. Everybody have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.